And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a newcomer into the temple, coming to us straight from Kyodai Games. Previously, a man who has dipped his hand into a lot of different fields in the realm of tabletop, going all the way back to things like Alderac.
Yes.
And now coming back to us with a improved edition of Infinity's Edge, known as Isekai Edition. The one and only Sean Carman. Don't call him San Diego. How you doing today, man?
Please. Good, how are you?
Yeah, I had to get that in there. I'm pretty sure you've gotten your fair share of Carmen San Diego jokes.
The best thing is when my students discover the game and think it's a whole new thing, and that happens every couple of years, so that's great.
Oh. Then again, I'm not one to talk, given how I gave one of my professors once a paper that was completely mirror written, because he set April 1st for the due date.
Wow, okay, that's, yeah.
So, I mean, if you're setting April Fool's Day for the due date, you should kind of expect that kind of thing.
Shenanigans.
Yeah. Our shenanigans are cheeky and fun. But it's a bit of a tradition around here to open with the humble beginnings, in a sense. So, I'd like you to walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
What made it stick? So I remember that when I was in, I don't know, mid to late high school, maybe, my brother and I got interested in Warhammer 40,000, the tabletop miniatures game, and we dabbled in that a little bit and played here and there. And then he and his friend migrated from that to Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which they thought was very cool, first edition. And they played with that a little bit. I had no interest in it whatsoever. I thought the concept was ludicrous. And I leafed through the book, and there was a power called Strike Mighty Blow, and I thought that was hilarious. So I just generally avoided it. Then the first break coming back from college, my freshman year, I think that was it, yeah. My friend Tony came back from Berea College in Kentucky with a couple of his friends, and they had the Star Wars role-playing game, first edition. And he wanted us to come over and play, and I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I wanted to go see him because I hadn't seen, we'd been inseparable in high school, and then I hadn't seen him in a few months. So we went over, I took my brother and his friend, and we all played that, and that was pretty much it. That was the very much rubbing heroin on your gums sort of scenario for me. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why it stuck exactly. I just thought that was the coolest thing that had ever happened. And so we played that a lot. We went out. Fortunately, within a couple of weeks of that, they released the second edition of the Star Wars D6 system. Mm-hmm. And that came into my local comic shop, and we picked that up and started playing it immediately. And I've never really stopped playing that one. I just wrapped up a year-long campaign with that, using that system with my my local group.
Did you grab Revised and Expanded when that came out?
Of course, yes. That Star Wars Second Edition Revised and Expanded is one of my. If you're trapped on a desert island and you can only take 5 books, that one goes. That's one of them. Yes, absolutely.
And the fan base for that has made a further refined version of that called Re-Up.
Yes, was it Revised, Expanded, and Updated? Yep. I have that on PDF, and I make use of it. I think there's a couple of parts of it that I'm not as keen on. They adopt what I think was kind of the Weston Games used in their master book system, kind of an advantage-disadvantage system. that I'm not as fond of. We don't generally use it, but I respect the lengths that they went to detail everything in the book. So I use that one pretty often as not.
Mm. There's been
I just lament that the Dutch, what is it? Was it a Dutch shoe company or something that caused West End Games to tank because we never got all the stuff on the prequels, and that we could have, that was a juggernaut back in the day. If that had
yeah.
stayed around, we could have had all kinds of nice things.
Well,
We
I
did.
think I think a lot of people really underestimate the impact that the D6 era had,
Oh
even
yeah,
on
no,
even
it's huge.
especially on the expanded universe,
Yes,
since
yes, enormous.
you know names of a lot of different species got their start in that book, as well as the fact that when Timothy Zahn was doing the Heir to the Empire series, the series that in a lot of people's mind kicked off the expanded universe, it didn't. The first was probably Tales of was some of the comics, but that's a whole other story. But when he needed research material, and Lucas Books had sent him several of the books from the RPG to study.
Hmm.
Uh, and there's been some folk who have made interesting cover variants for re-up. I think one of them was a throwback to the Star Wars manga that was published by Marvel back in the day.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Um,
think I've only seen the one that has the Millennium Falcon cover, but
yeah,
no,
that
I have heard it said by people who worked on Star Wars that it was the D6 RPG is what kept the franchise alive until the Zahn books really kicked things back into high gear.
mhm.
Well, I saw him at Dragon Con one year, and I had him sign the introductory fiction he wrote for the Dark Strider campaign box.
Yeah,
I took the D6 booklet out of that and took it to Dragon Con and had him sign that since he wrote
mhm.
it. It was
And
glorious.
the D6 system has been making a bit of a slow comeback recently.
Yes.
I mean, we got the Zorro RPG that used it not too long ago.
Yeah. From
And
Gallant Knight Games. Yeah.
mhm. uh, and if there's anybody who's been taking it and running with it, it's been Magnetic Press.
Oh yeah, they've got their Planet of the Apes is still going right now, isn't it?
Planet of the Apes is I think that I think that just finished
Yeah.
like a few days ago. Um, and even before that, they had Carbon Gray, which is a adaptation of the graphic novel of the same name. That was kind of the prototype for what they're calling their magnetic variant of D6.
Yes.
Uh, and they call it a magnetic variant, but it's not like it's a whole other edition. It would not be that hard to transfer over stuff from the D6 trilogy from 2004 into what they're doing.
No, no, I imagine it wouldn't. But my friend Alan Barr of Gallant Knight Games, he is about to in the very near future. I think he said it would be in July. Is launching a Kickstarter for the second edition of the D6 core system.
Yeah, I remember seeing the
Yeah.
previews for that making the rounds.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think he delayed it because he did not want it to overlap with Planet of the Apes. I mean, that's kind of the same. You're drinking from the same well of backers. I think when that happens. And,
yeah, although I did get to rub salt in a few people who were being cynical about Planet of the Apes, because there were some who were thinking that there were some among my group who were thinking that it was going to be adapting from the more recent movies, and I had said I have a feeling that is not going to happen. I think this is adapting the OG movie series, and
which
that,
I find curious. I've heard that as well, and I find that a little odd, just because, like, although they're not. You don't think about them a lot, but the more recent spate of movies, are far better than they have any right to be. Like every time I see one, I'm almost irritated that it's so much better than I expected it to be. And apparently they've made just boatloads of cash, which I did not know until somebody mentioned that recently, and I looked it up, and I was very taken aback by how profitable those movies have been.
I have to imagine that part of it is a Luigi wins by doing nothing scenario, because so many of their competitors have found new and interesting ways to fuck everything up.
Yeah,
And lose boatloads of money because they spend way too much on stuff that wasn't important. Um, Like I can always get a laugh when I look at the budget of say a Disney movie and then see how much it made back. You know,
Yeah,
they
I don't
spent
understand the metric that Hollywood uses to figure all that out. Like everybody's
um,
like, well, if you don't make at least double your budget, you've lost money. I don't understand that.
the
But
general rule is you've got to make 2.5 times, because you know the theaters are going to want their cut, the government's going to want their cut, and all the other people who helped in one form or another when it comes to distribution are going to want their cut.
yeah.
And of course, the tax man's always going to get his money.
Oh yes, absolutely.
But now with Infinity's Edge, which is this Isekai edition? I think this is something we need to nail down first. Is this a revised version of the original Infinity's Edge, or is this a second edition?
Of the two, it's definitely more of a second edition. And I've talked about this some places, so people may have heard me say this sort of thing before, but I've done a lot of writing for role-playing games during my career, but Infinity's Edge was the first time I ever designed something from the ground up. And over the years, after I did it, I was happy with it, and I played playtest games, and at my local group, we ran it, and we did some things, and I was happy with it. I still am happy with it. But as over the years, as I've talked to people and I've done some other things with it and whatnot, I just felt strongly that I erred a little too much by steering too far into genre emulation. And in terms of specifically, the one thing that bothered me absolutely the most, without question, was the sheer amount of math you had to do in determining, like how much, what can I do this round, because it's based on how much stamina or mana I can spend and things like that. And that really weighed on me enough that people were still buying the book, people were still having a good time, and that but it just, as a designer, it weighed on me until I couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah,
and so
the worst critic.
Yes, well, yeah. As a thought exercise, I redesigned the action economy a little bit to see what it would look like, and I was like, well, that works out pretty good. But then, then I have to tweak this and this, and then before I knew it, I had the bare bones of a new edition, and so I just decided, well, if we're going to do a new edition, then all the things that I left out in source books for the first edition, that all goes in the core book, so it's as complete as possible, because there were plenty of people who said this should have been in the core book, and frankly, those people were right. There were things that should have been in the core book that were not, that were spread out over some source books.
Yeah.
So we combined everything into one complete document. I made the changes that I wanted here and there, because I still wanted very much to feel like when you're, the whole idea. If you've read a lit RPG novel, I have a serious problem when it comes, honestly. It's not good. But the idea that you're playing in this virtual reality where all these rules apply and everything, I kind of want it to feel like when you're sitting around your table with your friends, I want it to feel like you're all logged in and playing this game together, and you're immersed in the world and the characters and the mechanics. And that's what I've been shooting for with this edition. And I feel like, based on all of the games that I've run and the people that have looked over it and run some for me, they all feel, it feels like it's been successful. But it just, I never have stopped since I bought my Kindle in 2000 for my birthday for myself so May of 2017, and I still have the same one. So I've had it for 7 years, and I've read hundreds and hundreds of books, and I would guess bare minimum 50% of them, probably more than that, have been lit RPG or game lit or whatever name people prefer to ascribe to the various subgenres. I don't like cultivation all that much, but I like the others. And so I just wanted to make something that captured that same thing. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. That was a very lengthy response. I'm sorry, but yes, it's definitely a second edition.
No worries. The lengthy responses is something that's always going to happen in this particular series, no matter what. So I just roll with the punches with it. But with the way you describe it, it sounds like one of the big things that you had an issue with was the tie between stamina and the action economy.
Yes.
So given that, how do you plan on addressing that with Isekai?
So what we've done with this one is I kind of steered harder into the idea that stamina and mana are like opposite sides of a coin. So depending upon if you generate a character, and if you're new to the game, you generate you have a character that is basically is a virtual avatar in a fully immersive fantasy role playing game. So your character has a health bar, a stamina bar, and a mana bar. And if you choose a class that is more magically inclined, like wizard or shadow mage or alchemist or what have you, then your abilities are going to be dependent upon mana. So whenever you cast a spell, you're using your mana. Whenever you are using your class abilities, you're using your mana, and it's a finite resource. It regenerates, but not at a speed that it's going to help you a lot in combat. So it's a resource that you have to track and make the best use of while you are playing. So rather than everyone needing stamina for everything, instead I turned around and steered stamina into the opposite. If you are not a magical class, if you're a warrior or a rogue or a berserker or whatever, then instead you do the same sort of thing with your class abilities, and instead of spells you have technique skills, which we've expanded since the first edition. So if you want to do these special abilities, which are your answer to the power that that spellcasters can unlock with spells, then you are expending stamina to use those things. And then when you level up, every time your health bar ticks up, every time you gain a level, so you have slightly more health every time you level up. But when you level up, you can only choose to increase your stamina or your mana bar. You cannot do both. So if you want a fighter mage build, which are very popular in the novels, I've never really understood why that's so prevalent, but then you have to manage which one of your bars you're increasing and make sure that you have enough to do what you want to do without running out. Whereas if you're a dedicated caster or a pure warrior or whatever, it's much easier to manage your expectations because you're focused on a single meter over the others.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened in the first edition was the part of the problem for me was that you could use stamina to do anything. If you want to move, I'm going to run for 50 feet this way, you spend a certain amount of stamina. Or I'm going to make an attack with this weapon. Every weapon had a certain amount that, you spend this much stamina to attack. It's less for a small weapon like a dagger. It's more for a larger weapon like a great sword. And there was a rule, like somebody was like, well, can I just burn all of my stamina? Very early in the process, someone was like, can I just dump all my stamina and attack 20 times in the first round? I was like, well, no, that's clearly not going to work. So we established a rule early on where you could use a fixed percent. I believe it was 20% of your stamina in a single round. And then we had to do the same thing for mana to keep everybody from turbo casting. And it just got to the point where as you increased and you're, at first level, everything starts at 100. It's very easy to calculate, I've got exactly 20 I can use. And as you level up, going through your levels, then it becomes a little bit more unwieldy and you're always calculating. And I didn't like it. It was too much math. I teach math every day in school. I don't want to have to do it when I'm playing with the guys. So when I rewrote the action economy, I wanted to try something simpler that would facilitate smooth, quick combat and let you focus more on, how do I spend my stamina or my mana rather than worrying about, do I have enough to stab with the sword or do I have to go with the dagger? So it's a simple 2-action system. You have 2 actions you can use during your turn. You can choose to move twice or attack twice or move and attack or cast a spell and stab somebody. And it is, in my experience, it has hastened to play at the table significantly, which I think is, the combat is I'm not going to say it's the only fun part of a role-playing game. That's obviously not true. But for a lot of people that I have played with over the years, that's the part they really relish, the tactical aspect, the excitement of it. And it speeds things up and it makes it quicker and simpler without sacrificing, all of the goodies that your character gets to do during the turn. It just makes, it makes it less math intensive and, not quite as difficult in terms of, choosing which option you're going to go with. You don't have as much analysis paralysis. So for me, I would say that is without question the most significant change in the edition is the migrating from the action economy being based on expenditure of meters to a fixed number of actions that you can take per turn, which may or may not utilize your meters depending upon your class abilities and whatnot.
Yeah, and in that regard, I'd like to shift a bit into skills, since you had some skills that had a bit more mechanical weight than others in terms of how they could be used. Some were just just a straight die roll. Some had their own little quirks about them. Is that something you plan on refining with this Isekai edition?
We have refined the skills a fair amount. The bare bones remains the same. There are four types of skills: combat skills, general skills, crafting skills. I'm sorry, five: technique skills and magic skills. They all require a percentile roll to use. Some of them are very basic. Like if you have the swords skill, for example, then it's pretty, you don't have to do anything except roll the dice and see if you hit the target. Yeah. That's true for most combat skills. That's true for most general skills. If you're using crafting skills, you have to have the materials to make things, but you can make all sorts of good stuff that way, which has always been part of the genre that I've enjoyed. We did, I'd say magic skills still work mostly the same way. You have a threshold you have to roll under in order to succeed at casting, and a lot of it, other than that, it's just dependent upon the spell. And we expanded the spell selection a fair amount in the core book to make sure people had plenty of things to play with. I'd say the big difference skill-wise is technique skills, just to make sure that they offered a similar utility to magic, since it is kind of the opposite number to magic, so to speak. Just to make sure that it allows characters to do things that they might not be able to do otherwise. It's anything that represents a high degree of skill in a physical confrontation, knocking somebody down, disarming somebody, grappling, called shots, sniping attacks, taunts, all things like that fall under technique skills. So even if you are playing a character that is not predominantly a martial character, you can still make use of those abilities. Although they get better versions of it with their class, and they're going to be better at it because of their other abilities, but if they remain on the table and anybody can use them, it's just a matter of whether or not it's beneficial to do so. But yeah, we tried to, when you say that some of the skills had their own little mechanics to them, that's very much the technique skills that you're talking about, and they kind of remain that way simply because it's a parity issue mostly.
And going further into that, there was the whole thing with traits, which there were 3 traits in the core book, but in terms of making your own traits or something to that extent, there wasn't a whole lot at the time in the core book. There may have been some in the expansions, but I really don't feel like digging up the expansions in my library at this moment.
I get that.
And the problem still is maintained. With Isekai, are you planning on expanding traits or giving guidance on what would be good or bad moves to make for players and GMs who want to make their own traits?
We do have a selection of traits in the core book. It's not huge, but it is half a dozen, and several of them are scales. Like relationship traits with certain groups and how you can scale it up or down depending on how you do it, which is again a nod to the genre that we're trying to emulate. But there are also guidelines on kind of the range that a trait should have. You don't want them to be too overpowered, and you want to what circumstances under which you might want to award them. If a player does something very noteworthy, or they're the first one to accomplish a certain task, or just certain criteria like this, might be a time when, if you were so inclined, you might want to award them a trait in order as a result of their actions. Traits should generally offer this kind of sort of this range of boost. If it's a fairly minor thing that a lot of people are going to have, it's going to be a pretty minor. If it's something more significant where only a limited few people have it, it should be kind of like this. And then if you're really bold and you want to give a unique trait to someone, it might be something like this. But keep in mind that doing that, you're going to quickly imbalance things between different player characters if that's what you're it's a risk for balance, but you have the option to do it if you want. So yeah, we are trying to be a little bit more comprehensive with the core book to make sure everything you need is in it. We had a lot of traits in different source books, so I've gone through and picked out the ones that I felt like were the most balanced and were good examples, and kind of presented them as a scale. And so we will see, hopefully, people get better use out of them as a result of that.
It sounds like there's certainly going to be more than just three.
Yes, there are more than three.
Now, given the changes to the action economy, based on the proper action economy instead of just what you can pay to an extent with stamina,
Right.
which when it comes to the class system, which you're still going to have the three tiers of classes, is that class system going to be going through some significant changes due to the change in action economy?
Well, obviously, we had to go back through and reevaluate. Well, we did reevaluate all of the class abilities, but we also reorganized the classes fairly significantly, because it bothered me that if you took two characters that were both rogues who got to a certain level, you could choose different abilities as you advance in level. Then at one point you've chosen all of the abilities. So every rogue of like level 28, for example, has all of the same abilities. And that's another one of the things that really bothered me in retrospect about the first edition that I didn't like. So instead, the classes, although they still function essentially the same, they've been rewritten to adapt to the action economy, as you said. And then when you reach level 10 and get your class, you gain access to the class's core ability, which is one that every rogue has the rogue core ability. Every warrior has the rogue. It's really the essential, kind of the kernel, the defining aspect of what they do. But then they choose two other abilities, and every class has three trees of three abilities each. So there's 9 different abilities that you can choose from. And in the time that you level up and reach the point where you're no longer using that class, when you elevate to your advanced class, you will only have selected 5 of the 9. So you can therefore have 2 characters of the same ancestry and same class who have completely different abilities, depending on how they want to emphasize it. Like the rogue has there's a thievery tree if their specialty is they want to go for somebody who's like a burglar or a pickpocket or something like that. Mm-hmm. There's an assassination tree if they just want to backstab people ruthlessly and kill things. And there's I think the other tree is infiltration, which it's more like a spy, a little bit more of a hybrid. They get in where they're not supposed to be and gain information and things like that, so they can blackmail people or they can work for get information on their lord's enemies and things like that. And then it all follows that same sort of organizational route. There are multiple trees with different abilities, and then how you progress in them is very, very much up to the individual.
Mm-hmm. Are hybrid classes still going to be a thing?
They are. There are still the 4 basic classes: priest, rogue, warrior, and wizard. There are the 6 hybrid classes, which combine 2 different of the base classes thematically. Like a paladin is a priest warrior, for example. A shadow mage is a rogue wizard. And then, of course, we also have a selection of specialist classes that are available in the core book as well. And then there is some advice on, like, listen, specialist classes are supposed to be things that you characters unlock because they want, they play a certain way and they are interested in a certain type of character, and maybe some of the other classes don't support it. So here's a selection of classes that you can use as a jumping off point. We're going to be releasing lots of more of those. That's one of the most popular things in the game. So we tend to release a lot of those in PDF supplements and whatnot.
Yeah.
And part of the Kickstarter is a series of monthly PDF releases that all backers get as part of their pledge. And I released an example. Like I had, people were asking questions. So I went to a friend of mine who had already backed. And I was like, listen, send me something like you're backing at the world design tier, right? You've played $60. You want to be able to submit something that will be canonized in the game somewhere. So send me some information like that might be something that you would submit for something like that. So he sent me a little paragraph about his this dwarven monk character in his monastery atop a mountaintop and things. And I maybe got a little carried away with it. I don't know. I wrote like about a 3,000 page document about us, like an alternate starter zone. And his monastery is at the top. It's this series of terraced mountain zones that you climb up through. And just so people would say, like, okay, if you're backing at that level and you want to submit things, this is the kind of thing you might expect to see based on your material or whatever. And then those are going to have some more specialist classes in them and things like that. But basic classes, hybrid classes, specialist classes, and advanced classes are all still very much part of the game.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of advanced classes, there was the introduction of the concept of it in the core book, but it was said as in development. I'm guessing that in the core book for Isekai there will be full-on advanced classes in there.
Yes, absolutely, there will.
Mm-hmm. So
they get their own chapter, I think. Let me look and see in my. Let me look at my table of contents. I know you like navigation. And I can tell you.
Yeah, navigation is key because, well, GMs and players alike are going to want to find a particular bit of info immediately during play or even when working on something, and having them jump around a bunch of places to try and find the one thing that they're looking for.
Yes. No, sorry, I put them in the GM chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But like, so an example of a rogue advanced class is the elite assassin, and an example of the warrior is the master at arms, things like that. So there are examples for all the basic classes, a bunch of the hybrid classes, some of the specialist classes. There's a lot of them in there, just so people can have, if somebody wants to go ahead and say, oh, I want to start at a high level and try it and see how it works, then you have the option to do that with a core book if you want. That seems like putting the cart before the horse, but I am not going to judge. You do you, man.
And while Isekai is laying off of the dependence on stamina for just standard actions, I'm guessing that a lot of abilities for martial inclined characters are still going to be using stamina.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Every class ability, there are a few exceptions, but I'd say 90+% of all class abilities across all types of classes use one of the meters as a resource, usually either stamina or mana. There are a few that use health. Those are weird classes. But the vast majority of the abilities use stamina or health or mana to fuel whatever the effect is you're trying to evoke.
Yeah. And in the process of doing this, it's going to mean that martial characters aren't getting as much of the shaft as they do in certain other more ubiquitous role-playing games. Which,
you could say that, sure.
Yeah. I will always pick on the whole fighters aren't supposed to be powerful argument in some fantasy games. I've been picking on that thing for decades, and I don't think I'm going to stop anytime soon.
Everybody's got a hill, man. That's just your hill.
It's not my hill to. It cannot be my hill to die on if I shoot the enemy first.
There you
go. Since you brought up the GM section, that'd be a good spot to ask if within the GM section you plan on putting any advice for GMs who may want to create their own classes for their campaigns.
So that originally I had a plan to include class designs as part of the core book. But the guys that I'm working alongside, I did all the writing for it, but I have a couple of guys that are, they're involved in the project and they're doing other parts of it. And they're like, dude, this is getting a little unwieldy. Like some of these things you're going to need to save for something else. Like we can't put literally everything in here. And that's true. We can't. So ultimately, some of the setting stuff got trimmed out just a little bit because there's a lot more of that this time, and probably the metrics on how I design spells and how I design classes, that's probably going to be in a GM release that comes very quickly after the core book comes out, just because I am aware that there's not a ton of people that want to design their own classes, but there's enough people who have asked about it over the years that I feel like it's something that should be out there. And then for me, if there was another game, even if I didn't play it, but there was a thing about here's how we design our classes, I would probably read that just because I design games and I'm fascinated by the process. So, the idea of getting it all down and putting something out there for people to kind of look at and see why I do things the way I do, I think that's neat. I kind of want to try it and see how it goes. But yeah, there are a few things that are not in the core book, and unique class design is at this point, unless somebody really convinces me otherwise. And since I had to be convinced not to do it, that will be an arduous task. But I'm almost certainly not going to be in there.
Yeah.
Right now, the book is roughly 3 times longer than the first edition core book. So I'm pushing my luck as it is. I really need to, especially if we end up doing a print. Like, obviously, the Kickstarter calls for PDF copies and for print-on-demand copies. We are considering doing an offset print run so that we can try and get it into retail with one of our distribution partners. And ultimately, if we do that, we're pushing up against the available envelope sizes that we have for the book right now. So I'm trying to limit anything. I've made a list as I've been updating the Kickstarter over the past few weeks of things I need to go in and make sure this is the way I thought it was, blah, blah, blah. Just little notes to myself that when it's all done, to make sure before the document is submitted to editors and layout people that I've tweaked all of my I's and T's. But yeah, that's probably not going to be in the core book.
Yeah. Now, I know that you add a bit of a primer on the setting of Infinity's Edge in the original core book.
Yes.
But within the Isekai version, do you plan on expanding that? Not in the sense of full expansion, like this is like a setting book, but something like going into detail about some sort of starting zone or something like that.
Yes, I have expanded quite a bit of information on the setting overall. Different zones that you can be in, different parts of the world. Give people, I looked at it as like what kind of information is available if there is a new fantasy game dropping. Like what kind of information is available to people so that they don't go in completely blind. And I tried to include all of that. Basically anything that we ever added that we felt was worthwhile for people to know in any of our source books or any of our zines got folded into the chapter. So it's quite a bit more information that way. We also had talked about in first edition, we'd always talked about the idea that there were things that could happen in the real world that could affect, again, quote, real world, the real world of 2050, which is where
the finite space.
The finite space, yes, thank you. That your finite characters, there might be things going on there. And so we had plans to do a pretty extensive use of finite characters, but I don't, as a lit RPG guy to some level, I don't know if you're familiar with Trinity Continuum Anima, which came out relatively recently, which is just an absolutely fascinating combination of cyberpunk dystopia post-war with a lit RPG on the side. It's just really intriguing the way that they have melded the game that they're playing with their regular characters, and then their characters can also log into this game where things are happening, and the two worlds are very closely interrelated. And so I looked at that and I was like, first of all, that's amazing. I love that. And second of all, I cannot possibly do it better than they're doing it right here. So we kind of scaled back our plans for finite characters. You do still have finite characters in Infinity's Edge. You create a fictional persona of your gamer, the person who's logging into the game, and you kind of give them some very rough mechanics. They have 4 qualities: physical, mental, social, and economic. And then so you put, here's so many points. You spread them among those 4 things. You pick which one of those 4 things is your primary quality. And then if you are, whichever one of those is your primary, that gives you an extra benefit in the game. Like if you're a fictional gamer from 2050 is a mental, their focus is on mental. Their primary quality is their mental quality. Then they're kind of a lore player, and once per session they get to make an automatic roll to know something that in game they might not know in game. Like, oh well, I saw this on a forum, or I read an interview with a developer and they were talking about this, and they get extra information that can help the group inside the game. If their primary is economic, then they know a lot about how money works, and so they get bonuses to manipulate, to get more or less money on the auction house when they're trying to sell loot and things like that. Just a little something to mix the two. And then the GM's chapter also has for GMs who want to, which I realize may not be. I don't know how big a cross section that is, but I know there are some GMs who want to kind of have both worlds be involved. There's a list of suggestions like this is how you can have your finite characters be involved with this stuff that these things are going on, like a rival guild. You're playing a rival guild in a tournament, and there's going to be you've heard from a mutual friend that they're talking about doing a denial of service attack against your block so that you won't be able to log into the tournament. How are you going to resolve that? And this, that, and the other. So just little extra things to try and kind of reinforce the genre that we're trying to emulate.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. So with that in mind, I do recall when it came to that you had a thing set up for structures for holdings and the like. Is that going to be expanded upon?
Yes, we've had it we kind of tiered it the same way that we've tiered groups in the game. So parties, if you have a party that is and again, parties can be semi-permanent in the idea of them, which is not how things really work, at least not in any games I've played. But you can leave your party intact as you guys log in and out, almost like it's you don't have enough people to make a guild if you have a party. Parties can control a stronghold. Guilds can control a settlement, and factions can control a domain. And there's rules for all three of those things. So if you have if you just want to own a little simple one room shop or something in a village with your character, you can, but the more people in your party that are part of it, then the larger you can get. You can get castles, keeps, etc. If you're part of a guild, then you can control an entire settlement, and then if you build your way up to a faction, then you can get this vast sections of land that you can control and manage the resources and things. I'm a little bit of I have a penchant for base building kind of mechanics. I've realized recently that I tend to insert those in a lot of my games without really noticing, and I'm not 100% sure my players always appreciate that. I'm trying to wean myself off them, but they're still very much present in Infinity's Edge because that's my game and I can do anything I want.
Yeah. And to further on with that, do you plan on putting an example domain or the like to help give it some context?
Yes, I expect that to be. I expect to feature those pretty regularly in the monthly supplements. I think there is one in the core book. I'll have to go back and have a look and make sure. But there's certainly a lengthy list of options. And then it's like, so for example, if you've got this many points and you're building a domain, here's what it could look like and that sort of thing. Just to make sure people kind of grasp exactly what we're talking about. Because if you're not in the fiction a lot, then it may seem like something a little peculiar. The idea that you are controlling this swath of land and you can make alterations to the terrain and things. There's rules for battles between different factions and how battlefields and things work. A lot of that was in the first edition, so I just took what we had and went over it very carefully and made sure that it worked. And if it didn't work, I revised it until I found a way to make it work, and then we just went from there.
Yeah,
expanded the bestiary quite a bit.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Now, since you have said that this is something of a second edition of Infinity's Edge, do you plan on putting a conversion guide if somebody wants to bring over their material from the original Infinity's Edge over to this edition?
Yes, just because it's incredibly simple. Like the vast majority of characters are almost ready to go from first edition. Now the attributes have changed very slightly. We tweaked the attributes a little bit, which means you'll have to adjust those. The majority of skills are the same. Some of them have different names. You may have to tweak those very slightly. The one thing that you would have to do, I would say probably the most would be, your class abilities almost certainly have different names. You'll have to chuck those out and pick new ones based on your level, but that's a pretty quick and simple solution right there. I mean, if you're hey, I'm level 18, so I'm going to have my core ability and 3 other abilities. That's easy. I just pick those and see what I get. I would say the most time intensive aspect of any conversion is going to be equipment. Just because the equipment chapter is pretty lengthy. It's in keeping with the parity between the two. It rivals the magic chapter in terms of its length. There's tons of examples of all different types of equipment, weapons, armor, items, alchemical goods, potions, you name it. But more to the point, the chapter is very open about how those are designed. Like at this level and this tier, this is what you use, blah, blah, blah. Basically, my goal was, and so far it has worked very well, is that the equipment chapter allows you to design any kind of equipment you want. So if you say, if you tell your players like, so you are all, you all get a reward from the guild for completing the quest. Everybody gets a tier 1 rare weapon, and so you just go to the equipment chapter and say, okay, tier 1 rare weapon. That means it has this many, does this much damage, it does this much, everything. It's basically their formula that let you quickly and easily tabulate what something like that looks like, no matter what level it is. And so I was thinking about that the other day. I was looking through and verifying all my charts, and I'm thinking, I need to make a 1-page reference sheet for equipment design. We're not planning to have a GM screen, but it would absolutely go on the back of a GM screen if we had it. So I'm thinking that is going to require me to put a new appendix in, just because I think it might all fit on 1 page, but I might spread it to 2 just to be safe. But so that you can just with a little, 1 sheet, or again, maybe 2, we'll see. You can quickly and easily determine what you need to do for any kind of equipment you want. And then because people frequently told me they were annoyed by it, I folded in, we had a product called 100 rune stones, which was just a massive length of tables of different rune stones and what you roll and see what you get, and all the different things that they might do when you want to enhance your weapons with them. And so I just revised those tables and put them directly in the equipment chapter. So everybody's got what they want. Hopefully. I know that's not true. That's never true. But I tried to take anything that I received as a question or criticism of the game from multiple sources independently. I was like, okay, if multiple people have said this, that's clearly something that is needed. So I tried to address all of that. If it's just some weird random thing that one person complains about, hey, why are there no cat girls or things like that, then if it would, I would ignore it. But if multiple people complained about things or asked about things, I tried to make sure that it was something that I was addressing in the book.
But with that in mind, what are you shooting for as far as a page count? I know that could change with stretch goals, but what are you?
The stretch goals won't affect the core book. The core book is written, and it should be done. Now, we've actually, I would like the first, I'm gonna say 5 days after we launched the Kickstarter. I'll be honest, I was like, yeah, I don't think we're gonna make it. It felt like in my gut for some reason. I had this. I'm a pessimist by nature, and so I was just like, well, probably not. I'm gonna need to go ahead and start planning for that just in case. But actually, the slow period in between the first and last 48 hours has been much more productive than a lot of my previous Kickstarters. It's just very slowly trickled up steadily the entire time, which I'm very happy about. Stretch goals will affect other releases. It won't affect the core book itself. The core book is done, and the Kickstarter, a lot of the money that will come from the Kickstarter is because I want to get more art. We have a very significant library of art from first edition. We have a few new, really incredible pieces that we've gotten as kind of to prep for the Kickstarter to use as kind of a, to advertise what we're the kind of look that we're going for. You can see those on the Kickstarter page. I want more of those. I want more really nice new pieces. And we'll just see. So that the art density is going to be the primary question about length. My preference, generally speaking, when I'm doing a book, if I have my druthers, is I want to make sure there's a piece of art, using quarter page, half page, whatever, roughly every 4th page. And if I can do that, great. A lot of times I can't. I'm a smaller publisher. I'm limited, and I don't like to rely too heavily on stock art, but I've used a fair amount of stock art in the past. And if it really suits the game, then we do it. Let me reach over here to my bookshelf and grab my first edition copy and see what the page count was, and I can give you a rough estimate.
Well, the page count on the PDF version that I have is 111 pages.
111 pages. Then, given the, let's assume, relative same density of art, given the comparative word counts, I would say you would expect the new core book to be somewhere around 275 to 300 pages.
Which
now, Mike Rodu, my layout guy, does fantastic work, and he's very good at utilizing all the space, making sure that there's not a lot of dead, empty space on pages and stuff. So we may be able to get that down a little farther. I don't know, but we will see. But that would be my estimate. The first book was something like 33 or 34,000 words, the entire manuscript. And the new one at the moment, although I expect to tweak it a little bit here and there, it shouldn't change very much, is right around 92,000. Mm-hmm. So it's a little more than double. And since we have so much more art now than we did when we did the first edition, I would expect the art density at the bare minimum to increase a little bit, just if I'm using my current library. If I can get a few more pieces with the Kickstarter funds, then it may be a little bit longer than that, but we'll see.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Well, with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my temple and enjoy the madness that happens around here.
Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. I appreciate it.
Anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
I've been to college. I know how it is. Don't worry.
And of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.